श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So today we're continuing on with our discussion of Sri Vacana Bhusanam by Pillai Lokacharya with the commentary by Manavala Mahamudikal. And we are going to, I will share on the screen the text. Okay, so this is the text. We came up to Sutra 259, which talks about the conduct of the prapana. Previously, just to explain, there was a big long section about a spiritual program that people should try to perform. Of course, we have to give a caveat here. We have to just say that there is no precondition for property. There is no pre-qualification for surrender to the Lord or for attaining moksha. It's simply dependent upon the mercy of the Lord, which is causeless, right? So, but still, the Shastras are the orders of the Lord, and the Lord orders us to follow the dictates of the Shastras. And in the Shastras, he explains how to live a devotional life, and therefore this spiritual program was given by Pillai Lokacharya. Then there was a section about Mangala Shashanam. Mangala Shashanam means blessing. Normally, you consider that a person in a greater position gives a blessing on a person in a lower position, so that the Lord is the one who should bless us. But in the case of Periyalwar, great Alwars like Periyalwar, he gave a blessing on the Lord when he said, "Palanda palanda palaya ratanda palkoti nurayanam malanda kintol manivanna unshevadi shevadi unshevadi tirakapu." He said, "Palanda palanda palaya ratanda, please, O Lord, you live. I bless you to live for thousands of years," like that. He gave his blessing. So this was out of his ecstasy, of course, that he did that. So there was a whole discussion, a small section here, the aphorisms from the sutras starting from 244, going all the way up to 259, I believe. 258, right. So now we're ready for 259. So that was all about Mangala Shashanam and different aspects of it. So now, this next section, right, the Venerable Teacher now begins to expiate on some of the other aspects of a prapanas, a refugee. Prapana means refugee, right? And we make a distinction between prapana and bhakta, right? A bhakta is a person, just like a karmi follows karma yoga. A jnani follows jnana yoga. A bhakta has devotion for the Lord and follows bhakti yoga. But in order to be a bhakta, you have to be devoted to the Lord. Whereas a prapana, right, has this feeling of helplessness, like a drowning man. We gave the example many times of a drowning man, person who's totally helpless and who therefore depends totally on the Lord. So the correct translation into English of prapana would be refugee, a person who has nothing and is unable to save themselves and realizes that, and therefore performs what is called prapati and just says, "I am yours. Whatever you want to do with me, you can do with me. I am surrendered to you," as Lord Rama says in his Charana Sloka, "Tavasmiti chayachate," he said. Somebody who just says, "I am yours," once only, Sakrideva Prabhupada. Okay, so that is a prapana, a refugee. So we always have to remember that we are not great elevated karmis, jnanis, or bhaktas, right? But we are simply got no qualifications, and we are in the lowest position, right? And this, we've been talking about different social positions also, and how it's actually to our advantage that we have no qualifications. It's to our advantage that we are socially very low, right? According to the Tengalaya acharyas, like Pilalokacharya, that to be born in a low status is actually an advantage, because the Lord takes mercy, he gives mercy to us, he takes pity on us, because we have no qualifications, and therefore we don't have to perform all these difficult sadhanas of bhakti yoga, karma yoga, and jnana yoga. We simply have to do what the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharma Parityajya, so surrender unto me and I'll save you. Okay, so we understand that's the basic principle of property, and therefore we're reading about property, about the system of property, which it has no qualifications, but still a refugee should act in a certain way. And the scriptures also tell us how to act, and we act in this way for two reasons. One is just because the Lord says so. It's there in the scriptures. He says that you should act in that way, and therefore we try to follow as best we can. You know, there's no hard and fast rules that if we mess up some way or whatever it is like that, we're not doomed to hell or we don't make it. We are going to be saved by the Lord. We have to have mahavishwas, or great faith that will happen. But he gives the program in the scriptures. He gives the commands. So we follow those, right? And therefore, even for the properness. So the first reason is because he just says so. Because he says it, he writes in the scriptures. The second reason is in case anybody else is looking at us and they don't understand about property. They don't understand that you can simply surrender to the Lord. They think that instead of this one verse in Bhagavad Gita, surrender unto me, or this one verse in Ramayana, just say I am yours, right? That all these other scriptures say we have to perform bhakti yoga, karma yoga, and jnana yoga. Therefore, we should be doing bhakti yoga, karma yoga, and jnana yoga. And without our efforts, without our self-effort of doing these things, we can't attain liberation. We cannot, we have to meet some people think we have to meet the Lord halfway. We have to, by our efforts only, is he going to look and he's going to save us, like that. That is called cooperative grace. Whereas we are interested in the Lord's causeless grace because we know that we can't actually do anything ourselves. So there are people who preach about cooperative grace. These are like the Vadagalais or like other types of Vaishnavas or even other religionists. And then there are the people who are dependent totally on the causeless grace, and those are the properness. Okay, so in order to show those people who don't have the same mentality as the refugee, right, who don't have that complete dependence on the causeless grace of the Lord, in order to show those people who believe in works as well as faith and think that by their own efforts they can achieve something, right? So that's why we also perform these works and do this conduct according to the scriptures, because it sets a good example for other people. These other people think that they have to do karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. They have to put in hard works, and they have to put in a lot of work in sadhanas and things like that. And without doing that, they can't make it. And therefore, we show them an example. We should show them a good example. We shouldn't disturb their faith if they can't understand that actually the Lord does everything through us. Anyway, so without him, not a blade of grass moves. So if they can't understand all those things, right, if they really think that by their own efforts they're going to achieve something in spiritual life, then fine. Then they can see us, and we're also we're following the rules of the scriptures and following this thing, and they can take a good example from us. So we don't want to set a bad example, and we also want to follow the Lord's work. In our sankalpas, we always say Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Karya Rupam. Okay, so Bhagavad Gita means because it's the order of the Lord, that's why I'm doing this thing. Just because it's his order, I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to get any benefit. I'm just doing it because it's his order. He says to do it, so therefore I should do it. And It is a service to him. It's a service to him because he wants all of the jivas. He wants all of the children to attain moksha. He wants all of his creation to attain moksha, to get free from illusion and come be with him, right? But so therefore, we should show a good example to other persons to follow the paths in the scriptures. Okay, so with that introduction, we're going to go to Sutra number 259, which is the beginning of this section about also another section on the conduct of the prapana. We already had that long section about a spiritual program for the person who's the prapana, like that. Okay, so the well-disposed ones, anukulan. And remember, in the definition of bhakti or prapati or surrender, sharanagati, let's say. Sharanagati means surrender, right? In the definition, there is anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjana. So here, in the very beginning of this sutra, is mentioned the word anukulya. Anukulya means following, anukulyasya sankalpa, following his, we do everything favorable, right? Is anukulyasya sankalpa. And sankalpa means his will, the Lord's will. So everything favorable to his desire. And pratikulyasya vajra. Pratikulyasya is the opposite to anukulyasya. Anukulyasya means doing everything favorable. And pratikulyasya means giving up things which are unfavorable. So here we have, he's mentioning here in the sutra, anukulyasya. So these are the 5 or 6 aspects of sharanagati or surrender. Like that. Surrender is actually, it's got 5 limbs. Like some people say these are 6 limbs and they include surrender, but it's really a definition of surrender that includes these 5 limbs. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjana, and mahavishvasha, and gopatritvaranam, depending upon him having great faith that he'll save you. And anyway, doesn't come to me the 5th one. All right. The well-disposed ones, those who are anukulya to the Lord's desire, right, are those who are disgruntled with samsara, right? With everything in this material world, we're not really happy with it. We'd rather be in Vaikuntha serving the Lord, in the best way, right? And in whom wisdom, devotion, and dispassion are prominent, right? So that's the goal. The goal is to be like that. Of course, once again, if we're not fully wise or devoted or dispassionate, that is not a disqualification, right? So, but anyway, the well-disposed people who are prapanas, right, to the Lord, these aspects of their character will naturally come out as they continue on in their life. Wisdom, devotion, and dispassion are prominent, and whose actions confirm the existence of these qualities. So not only are they internally wise, devoted, and dispassionate, but you can see by their actions that they are. The definition of anukulyan, or one who is a worthy spiritual friend, kalyana mitra means friend, kalyana means auspicious, is given. He or she has realized the unsatisfactory and ephemeral means transitory or temporary nature of samsara, and has the spontaneous arising of wisdom, devotion, and dispassion, right? So it's a good word to use here, spontaneous. It spontaneously arises. So we don't need to labor very hard for these qualities to arise in our character. They will arise naturally if we simply continue on the path of prapati. Right. Or even, so what is this? The spontaneous arising of wisdom, devotion, or dispassion, or even one of these qualities. So all of them, or even one of these qualities, these good qualities, and who actually manifests them in daily life. Right. So that's right. So we see these things. If we have them internally, then we will naturally, in our thoughts, words, and deeds, these things will manifest. Right. So we say there are 2 things, right? There's when you go to a doctor or if you do an analysis of a person, right? there are two things. There are what we call signs and symptoms, right? So when you go to the doctor will ask you, what are your symptoms? He can't see your symptoms. The doctor can see the signs. You know, he may see externally, he may see something by looking at you, by testing things. But he wants to know from you the symptoms. What's going on internally? How do you feel? So these two things are being described in the sutra. There's the symptoms and the signs. So the symptoms of wisdom, devotion, and dispassion, and the signs, the external signs of those things, or even one of those qualities. But just remember, again, these qualities are not compulsory. In other words, or let's say they're not a prerequisite. They're not a qualification that we need to attain in order to attain moksha. Somebody may say, "Oh, well, you know, I lived a short life only, and then some prapana, he surrendered to the Lord. He did some ashrayanam, he surrendered to the Lord. He's a surrendered person, and then very soon after that, he passed away. He didn't have time to study all the shastras. He didn't have time to do all the pujas. He didn't have time to do much sadhanas or to do all these scriptural things which are mentioned, right? So how could he have attained moksha? Yes, he can attain moksha, of course, even without being a prapana for a long time. So we shouldn't think, oh, somebody who just understood about surrendering to the Lord, right? He can't have already made it. You know, he's only just understood this concept of property. How can he immediately go to moksha? Yes, he can immediately go to moksha because that's what Lord Rama says. Once only if you surrender unto me, I take care of everything. I save you from the greatest type of fear. That is my promise, he says, Lord Rama. And Lord Rama never breaks his promise, right? So, okay, moving on to 260, right? Just as from a flooded field, water seeps into a neighboring field. Okay, so this is an allusion to perhaps rice growing. Okay, if anybody's ever seen rice terraces in Bali or in India or anywhere in Southeast Asia, you need a lot of water to grow rice. So what you do is you channel the water from one field and it flows into the next field and the next field, so you don't have to individually water the field, but it flows into all the fields, the water. So just as water seeps into the neighboring field. So from association with these persons, what persons? The persons we just talked about, the persons who are prapanas, who are anukulyans, who are following the system of property, right? Who are the prapanas, the other refugees, right? By associating with them, those persons who have spontaneous arising of wisdom, devotion, dispassion in them, and who also we see by their actions they have those qualities, right? By associating with those persons, right? By those who are lacking in wisdom, devotion, dispassion, grief born of deficiency will vanish, right? What does it mean, grief born of deficiency? We all think it's natural for prapanas to think, I'm not qualified, I'm unworthy of the grace of the Lord. And in fact, every morning, there's some slokas which Sri Vaishnavas tend to pray and saying that, thinking that we have wasted our life up until now and we should continue to do better, and today we should really make an effort to although effort is not the point, but we should really continue to think of the Lord and be surrendered unto the Lord, like that. So we're always thinking that we're deficient. We're not deficient, but we're always thinking that we're deficient. We are naturally deficient because we only by the grace of the Lord, only by the Lord's mercy can we be saved. So in that sense, we're deficient, but we're not deficient in the sense that the Lord's explained to us through his own teachings, the Shastras and the Acharyas, has explained to us that he will save us if we just do very simple thing like say, I am yours, one time. So we shouldn't think that we're deficient, but naturally it's the tendency of people who are humble, right? And a refugee has to be humble because he has no qualifications. He's completely disqualified. materially, and some people even spiritually. They feel I'm not worthy. I'm not a great spiritual leader or anything like that. So they feel deficient, whether it's material or spiritual or social. However, they feel deficient, and therefore they feel some grief, right? This is what happens in some other religions that we have, where the emphasis is on works. The emphasis on works, for instance, in Catholicism, if you don't perform the works, if you don't do that, you're always thinking I'm deficient. Therefore, you always have this grief. So you have a religion which is based on not on love, for instance, but on fear. Fear. We're always fearing, oh, I'm a sinner. We're all sinners, and therefore, and what does God do to sinners? He punishes the sinners. He throws them into hell. Maybe there are some religions that say even they go to hell forever, like Madhism or Christianity. They say you can even be judged and you're a sinner and go to hell. So according to, for instance, Christian theology, right, everybody's a sinner, and we agree. We're here. If you're here in the material world, it's pretty difficult to avoid sin. There's sin at every step. Even you walk in the garden, you may kill an ant or something like that. There's going to be some sin in just breathing air, killing so many microbes, whatever it is. So I think in the scriptures it talks about lighting a fire, sweeping with a broom, drinking water, breathing air. All these things are sinful in some way. Okay, so it's impossible to avoid sin in this material world because it's a material world. So it's just impossible in this material body. It's impossible. Of course, we should try to avoid the major sins and things like that. It's very difficult. You can't avoid breathing and drinking water or maybe lighting fire or these things. But there are ways to get around that. And the Vedas are full of different ceremonies and sacrifices to alleviate what we call pratiharas, prayaschitas, things to alleviate that. No, we don't even have to do those things because we're completely dependent upon the Lord. But anyway, if you don't feel dependent on the Lord and you do feel this deficiency, you can go through all those systems as well. Okay, but the Prapanas don't usually do that. Okay, so the point is, associate with the Prapanas, right? Even if we think I am so fallen, I'm not really even a Prapana. Somebody can be surrendered to the Lord, and he still thinks I'm not a great Prapana. Ramanuja was a Prapana. My Acharya is a Prapana. Or my teachers and different saints that I read about, these people were all devotees. They were all refugees also, following the path of property. But I'm not great like them. Even if we feel deficient like that, we can associate with other Prapanas who are developing those qualities, good qualities. And by doing that, our grief from feeling that we're inherently deficient, we're not deficient as far as property is concerned, but we might be deficient as far as karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga is concerned, right? Because these paths require qualifications and they require hard efforts, self-efforts to perform them, right? You can't say, if you say to somebody, you have to do kirtana, or you have to do japam, or you have to do vratam, you have to fast on Ekadasi, you have to do all these things. If you don't do these things, you will go to hell. Right? If you read scriptures and you say, oh, okay, if I don't do this, I'm going to, if I do this, I'll get some benefit. But if I don't do it, I may get some sin will attach to me. And if sin attaches to me, then God won't save me. He won't help. He won't take me to moksha, or I'll have to stay here in this material world. And that's an unending cycle. And I can end up even losing the human form of life and just be bound up in samsara forever. That's possible, right? According to the system of karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. Even Arjuna says to the Lord in Bhagavad Gita, he says, what happens to the transcendentalist? Even the person, transcendentalist means what? If he's following yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, these people are all doing yoga. We're not talking about people who are just materialists. People who are proper karma yogis, jnana yogis, bhakti yogis, these people are actually following the Shastra. They're transcendentalists. But that transcendentalist, what happens to him if he doesn't complete the sadhana, if he doesn't complete the course, if he does something against the rules and regulations of his, his system, right? His path of self-effort, right? That person, Lord Krishna says, that person comes again and takes birth again in a pious family, is automatically attracted to yogic principles, and he continues on from where he left off. But property is not like that at all. Property is not like that at all. Property doesn't rely on people reaching a certain level, and then in the next life they're going to reach another level. You have reached enough level by simply surrendering to the Lord one time, as Lord Rama says, to be saved. That's it, finished. That's over. And you should put that out of your mind. You should have great faith that the Lord is going to save you no matter what. No matter what your level of wisdom, devotion, dispassion is. You may be very wise, very devoted, very dispassionate, right? Right? Or you may not be. You may be ignorant. You may have no devotion. You may be completely caught up in different passions and different, emotions of this world, material things. But because you surrendered to the Lord, right? You see different. We look. Let's see in the news. There are many people who are refugees around the world, just material refugees, and you see there are some people, like they take some shots and they talk to people in refugee camps. There's some people who've got it together. They have a nice situation, even though they're refugees somehow or other. They have good behavior. There are other people who are completely destitute. They hardly have food to eat, clothes to wear, water to drink, the sanitation. They have nothing, right? Both these people are refugees. So there are refugees who are more dispassionate, more devoted, and more wise. And there are refugees that are less dispassionate, less devoted, and less wise. But they're all refugees. And because they're refugees, they all get taken care of by the Lord. Because he says, I will take care of all of you. Right? Okay. So the point is, those who are less qualified, or who have less of this wisdom, devotion, and dispassion, they should try to associate with other persons who are also on the same path of property, of surrender, right? And who perhaps have more of these good qualities. And by associating with them, it's like the water traveling from one flooded field into a neighboring field. When the field gets flooded with water, they just open a little channel, and it flows by gravity naturally into the adjoining field, and then into another adjoining field. So it can't flow into a field which is far away, right? It has to flow into a field which is close. So the point is about association with other prapanas. And the same thing is there with Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. The association with other persons on the same path, with the same mentality, with the same understanding, that is going to help person to advance like that. Now, of course, advancing in Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga is the point. In property, do we have to advance? We don't. We don't have to advance. The whole process is finished by simply surrendering to the Lord, like that. But still, we are recommended to associate with other prapanas like that. If we don't associate with other prapanas, if we never increase our wisdom, if we never increase our devotion, if we never increase our dispassion, if we never get completely detached from material life like that, it doesn't matter, because we have once taken shelter of the Lord. He will save us. Okay, so anyway, carrying on. Again, the importance of right association, or satsanga. Sat means eternal. Sangha means coming together, or communion, let's say. Satsanga means eternal communion. Eternal communion means having like-minded people and being with them, is stressed. By befriending and associating with those who have wisdom, devotion, and dispassion, one is influenced in a like manner. It's very simple. Okay, so we understand. It's not difficult to understand this. In Sutra 261, he says, these characteristics of self-nature will arise spontaneously when the attainment is near, as the sands of a riverbed produce oozing before the approaching flood. Okay, so I don't know if anybody in Hawaii, we see it sometimes, there's a thing called a flash flood. So when the flood is about to come, how does a flood occur? Akasha patitatoyam yadagati sagaram. Sarvadeva namaskaraha. Sri Keshavam padigachati is a very famous verse. It says, as water falls from the sky and ultimately goes to the sea, all the prayers that we offer to all the gods actually are prayers to the origin of all the gods, Sriman Narayana, Lord Keshava. Keshavam padigachati. They ultimately go to Keshava. Okay? So, the allusion in that verse is to water falling from the sky and reaching the sea. How does it reach the sea? It falls on the mountains, like you see behind me, and it comes down as different streams. The streams enter rivers, which are bigger streams. The rivers enter Mahanadis, or great rivers, and those great rivers flow ultimately into the sea. Most great rivers ultimately flow into the sea. Right? And the ocean is the, you can think of the ocean like the Lord also, because the Lord has so many qualities, just like an ocean. We were discussing this today in Stotra Ratna class, in verse 7 of Stotra Ratna. Vimanacharya compares the Lord to the ocean. And we are just like little particles, little droplets of water. So we want to get in union with him. We want to, yoga means union, right? So we want to again attach ourselves to him, right? Just as the water flows from the mountain, from the sky, down the mountain, into the ocean. Okay. So the idea here is that when the water is coming down, the water doesn't only come on the surface, but the water also comes underneath. Yeah. So sometimes we see characteristics of people externally. When we see the river flowing on top of the land, we see an external flow of water. But there's also an internal flow of water. Even when the river is dry, if we dig down into the sands of the river, we'll find that very soon, if we dig just a few feet down, we'll find water there in the riverbed, what we call the riverbed, right? Which means the river when there's no water there, in the solid part of the earth, right? Where the river would fit. Underneath, sometimes even there's a subterranean river. It never comes on the surface. So subterranean river in this sense would be when a person actually has wisdom, has dispassion, has devotion inside, but you don't see those things manifest externally. Externally, he may seem like he's just a materialistic person, but internally, he has these ideas like that. There's some examples of some very great saints like that nobody could tell from their external. Sometimes we call these people like avadutas, right? The name is in Sanskrit. Sometimes we see a person like that, and it appears to be very materialistic from the outside. But actually, if we start talking to him, if we associate with him, we can understand that he has those internally. He has those qualities, but they just not manifest externally. So what happens is when the flood comes from the sky of the water, it comes, and the first thing it does is it lands on the ground and it seeps into the ground. It seeps into the ground. And that water then comes in the rivers like that. So sometimes we see even a riverbed is dry, but if we dig down, we find out that there is the water there. So similarly, we might associate with other people who are prapanas. Externally, they don't seem to be so advanced. They don't seem to be so devoted, dispassionate, or wise. But if we just simply associate with them, we'll find that they have these hidden gems of characteristics within them. So that's the whole idea here. That usually the water will be under the surface before you see it on the top. So sometimes when we have a flash flood, we first start seeing when the flood is coming. We don't see it. We're on a dry riverbed, and the water is coming down. But we don't see the water immediately, but the water is in the ground, right? Because if the ground isn't first saturated, the water won't flow on the top. It'll just sink into the ground. Water goes into the ground, right? So these characteristics, first of all, how they manifest in a person is they first of all manifest on the inside, and they show outside only later, or maybe not at all externally, right? But they're just inside. Only after after those characteristics are inside, do they show out. So similarly, when the water sinks into the earth, it starts first of all, and then it starts to bubble up a little bit. So you're on the riverbed, and the riverbed's dry, and you see in the distance, maybe very, very far away, that it's raining on the mountains. So you think the water is coming. So the water first starts to show from the underground stream. It starts to bubble up through the sand of the riverbed. So you see little pools of water start coming up, and then you see the flash flood coming down. So this is a sign that a flood is going to occur when water starts coming out of the riverbed, right? So similarly, when we see by close association with other prapanas or other bhaktas, we see their good qualities. Occasionally we see the signs, right? Or then we understand the symptoms that they have these qualities within, and then they just burst forth like that. So these characteristics of self-nature, wisdom, dispassion, devotion, will arise spontaneously. That means we shouldn't worry about trying to force them to arise when attainment is near. Attainment of what? Attainment means moksha. When attainment is near. Moksha happens at the end of life when the body falls, like that. So we don't know when we're going to die. So we don't know exactly when this time will be, right? But he's saying that spontaneously these should arise when attainment, what he's talking about attainment is the flood, is that external flood. As the sands in the riverbed produce oozing or pools coming up through the ground, right? When there's an approaching flood. It's a very, very, very nice sutra here. Okay, so now we're going. These two sutras, three sutras, were about the conduct of a prapana, and it was emphasizing here. What was being emphasized mostly here? Association with other prapanas and the spontaneous nature of the arising of wisdom, devotion, and dispassion, the spontaneous nature. So, number one, we should try to associate with prapanas, but even if we can't associate with prapanas, these things will occur, but they're spontaneous. They are not not prerequisites, not something that has to be forced. It will come naturally. Okay, so that's the point of this section. So then we have one sutra here. It's given a title of another section, Wisdom, Devotion, and Dispassion. Because that's what we were talking about. So let's talk about those again. In Sutra 262, he says, these signs, that is, wisdom, devotion, and dispassion, right, are indicative of that this is certainly the last incarnation of one in whom they appear. Okay? So, when we see a person who has these qualities of wisdom, devotion, and dispassion, we can understand that this is going to be their last incarnation. They're going to go to moksha, like that. So we can also see this in karma yogis, jnana yogis, and bhakti yogis. These people are also transcendentalists. They're also trying very hard, according to their qualifications. They think that they have to perform these works of self-effort, karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. They do it, and we can see these signs may even appear in them. We're not denying, we're not saying only prapanas, these signs will only come in prapanas. There are some very, very devoted karma yogis, jnana yogis, bhakti, especially bhakti yogis, right? Who have these qualities, these signs. They have signs. Again, the signs are the external manifestation of the symptoms inside, which they have. So they have those symptoms, and therefore they really are wise, they really are devoted, and they really are dispassionate. They really don't care for material sense gratification. So they have all those things. They really have all those things. Sometimes, of course, it is possible to be a charlatan or to be what we say bogus or not a cheater, where someone artificially tries to show that they're wise or devoted or dispassionate. Externally, they make some show, what Prabhupada used to say is a show bottle, right? Something which it doesn't have any substance. The actual symptoms of these things are not there, even that person, at least he's trying. At least he's trying to show that he's wise. He's trying to show that he's devoted. He's trying to show that he's dispassionate. Okay? So because we say practice makes perfect, of course, that's an idea that goes with the paths of effort, self-effort, karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. But still, we can understand that these people also feel like that. Let me try to be wise. Let me try to be devoted. Let me try to be dispassionate, and eventually I will be. So sometimes we see that people try to manifest the external signs of these things, of these qualities, but they don't actually have fully imbibed the ideas or the internal characteristics of these things. So that's okay. Also, that's also fine, right? But we should know that whether they are truly have the symptoms of these, or whether and are showing the signs externally, or whether they're just pretending or trying or practicing. Let's say, instead of saying somebody's pretending, why don't we say, or he's cheating, why don't we say he's practicing? He's practicing being wise, being devoted, being dispassionate, until he becomes perfect in these things, right? Then we can understand that this is going to attract the Lord. The Lord is going to say, look, he's trying so hard, I'll save him. The Lord, of course, even if you don't try hard, if you simply surrender unto him, he's going to save you. So much more for the people who are trying hard. So we never say bad things about people who are performing karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. They're following the commands of the Lord just as we are, right? They just have a slightly different understanding of what is necessary to attain moksha. But certainly they're going to also attain moksha because they are also trying to cultivate wisdom, devotion, dispassion. They're also trying to serve the Lord. The karma yogi is giving all the results of his work to the Lord. The jnana yogi is worshiping the Lord through his intelligence, through study of scriptures. And the bhakti yogi is worshiping the Lord through navada bhakti, all different types of bhakti, shravanam, kirtanam, vishnu smaranam, padasevanam. He's trying to cultivate that devotion of the Lord. So all of these people, all of these transcendentalists, they're all trying to serve the Lord. The Lord's going to help them. He's going to save them. So even if somebody says, oh, that person is a cheater, he's not really wise, he's not really devoted, he's not really fully dispassionate, still has some attachments to the material sense gratification. Okay, but at least he's trying, and the Lord sees him try like that. The Prapana realizes, I can't follow these others' paths that have these certain prerequisites because I can't even come up to the level of the prerequisite. What to speak of actually fully, properly performing the sadhana, which takes so much effort, right? It may take many births, according to the Shastra, right? So therefore, I'm completely surrendered to the Lord. So in any case, right? In any case, we can understand that people who are at least trying to cultivate wisdom, devotion, dispassion, this is going to be their last birth. Whether they be prapanas or karma yoga, jnana yogis, or bhakti yoga, whatever. Those who should be avoided. All right, so many times in the scripture, we see a positive thing which is given, like we described, anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya vajana. So anukulyasya means following what the Lord's will is, whatever's favorable, accept everything favorable, reject everything unfavorable, right? So now we've talked about what's favorable. Now let's talk about what's unfavorable. Okay, so those who should be avoided. So the pratikulas, here the same word is the same word with a different prefix, prati instead, prati which means opposite. Pratikulyasya, pratikula is described. So the ill-disposed or pratikulas, right, are those who identify the self with the body-mind complex. Very, very first point and most basic point of spiritual life. And we don't have any disagreement with the karma yogis, jnana yogis, and bhakti yogis. Anybody who's reading scripture has to understand from the very beginning, and that's the thing which we first understood when we first came to spiritual life or Vaishnavism, you are not this body. You are not this body, neither are you this mind, right? You're not the gross body, you're not the subtle body. Lord Krishna says in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, these are my separated energies. They are separated from me. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. They are separated from me. So don't think that you are that. You are not that. In the Vedanta, there's a very common statement, thou art that. You are that. You are not that. You are not that. You are not earth. You are not water. You're not fire. You're not ether. You're not mind. Some people think I'm the mind. You know, I'm the intelligence. That's me. No, you're not. You're something beyond that. Aparayamita swanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabaho. You are a jiva bhuta. You are that, not that body. You are a soul. You are a self. What we call chaitana, a sentient being, right? A sentient being, right? So that's what you are. So first and foremost, we know a person to be ill-disposed to karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, and property, to all these different paths of attaining moksha, if they think that that the self is the body, if they think that the body and the mind, the body-mind complex is the self. It's not. That's the very first thing. Now, somebody may think like that, and then somebody may act like that. Normally, we see people, they act as though the mind-body complex is the self. And that's because they think. Normally thinking, feeling, willing, normally we think first, and then we act, right, according to our thoughts. So we can see by people's actions that they think like that. Because they think they're this body, therefore they act like that, right? Those who act according to their whims, okay? So whimsically means they first of all have this mentality that the self is the mind body, and then whimsically they act. Because if you know that you're not this body, you don't act whimsically. You're not going to act whimsically because you understand that the self is the Sheshi, the Shesha. The Lord's the Sheshi, he's the master. The self is, what is the real nature of the self? If you know the real nature of the self as the servant of God, as completely dependent upon God, right, then you can't act whimsically because you know the real nature. Only people who don't know what the real nature is act whimsically, right? Those who show allegiance to others, what did we talk about? We talked about that he is the only one, the Supreme Lord is the only one who owns the soul. You can't, what does the Bible say? You can't have two masters. You can't have two masters. You can't say, well, yeah, I'm a servant of the government, or I'm a servant of my wife or my husband, or I'm a servant of my parents, you know, like that. And I'm also a servant of Narayan. No. Sriman Narayana is your only master. He's your only master, like that. So, here, who show allegiance to others rather than the Lord, who is the only master and the only enjoyer, right? What does the Gita say? Bhaktaram yagisa tapasam, sarvaloka maheshwaram, suhridam sarvabhutanam, yadvamam shanti michi. You can only have shanti, right? Yadvamam shanti michiti. You can only have peace if you understand the true reality of your nature, which is that the Supreme Lord, right, Bhaktaram yagitapasam, is the supreme enjoyer of everything, including you. Everything is meant for his enjoyment, right? Bhaktaram yagitapasam, sarvaloka maheshwaram. He owns and controls everything. He owns you. He's your master. You're the slave. You're the servant. You're the serf. And he controls you. He completely controls you also, right? You have minute independence. You have enough independence to say, I'm surrendered to him or I'm not surrendered to him, basically. That's it, right? After that, he is doing everything. He is doing everything through us, right? Okay, so if we don't understand this, we act whimsically, right? We show allegiance to others. Right? Now, that doesn't mean, okay, so I'll give one example of where showing allegiance to somebody is not against this principle. If you show allegiance to the guru, because showing allegiance to the guru is showing allegiance to the Guru Parampara, to the Gurus, to the Guru Parampara, to the Lord, Sriman Narayana, because the Lord's representative is the Guru, right? So that will be only one example like that. But ultimately, we have to understand that our allegiance is only to the Lord, right? Those who are attached to other means, now this is where we're different from karma yogis, jnana yogis, and bhakti yogis. The prapana, right? He is not attached to other means, upayas, other means. Now, what does that mean? So here in Vacana Bhusanam, there was a section that was explaining the process. The process is, first of all, we control the mind, and then we control internal, and then we control external, the senses. By doing that, Lord will send us a proper acharya. We will take shelter of the acharya. The acharya gives us the Tira Mantram. He gives us the proper method of performing property, right? Through the Tira Mantram. And then by cultivating the Tira Mantram and knowledge about the Tira Mantram, knowledge about surrender, knowledge about property, right? The essence of the Tira Mantram is property. The essence of all the mantras we get from the Gurus is property. We get Tira Mantram, Dvaya Mantram, Charma Sloka, and maybe even Rama Charma Sloka, Varaha Charma Sloka. These are all talking about the same thing. If we were smart enough, Omkara would be enough, by the way. Even the essence of the Omkara, the essence of the Vedas is Omkara, and the essence of Omkara also is the same as the Tira Mantram, Dvaya Mantram, Charma Sloka, etc. The essence is there in that single syllable, but we're not smart enough to fully understand that. Well, I mean, some of us might be. So these other elaborations are there, and we read about them in the Rahasya Granthas, in the esoteric scriptures. So there are people like karma yogis, jnana yogis, and bhakti yogis who have decided that there are other means. There are also people who are not even transcendentalists, who are materialists, who feel that there are other means. There are people who think that by making money or by cultivating different material activities and material things, they can satisfy themselves and they can get real happiness. It's not really real happiness because, again, it's transcendental in this material world. But the transcendentalists know that real happiness is beyond this material world, and therefore those people, they endeavor by their efforts, the karma yogis, jnana yogis, and bhakti yogis, by their efforts, they think karma yoga is the way. It's the upaya. It's the means to liberation. Or jnana yoga is the means. Or bhakti yoga is the means. But none of these are actual means. The initial means of attaining moksha, according to property, the idea of property, is to find an acharya, a good acharya, surrender through him to the Supreme Lord, and to cultivate knowledge and devotion through the Tira Mantra and other mantras that he's given, like that, and to cultivate the idea within our minds, that we are surrendered to the Supreme Lord. That's the initial upaya. The actual upaya, the actual primary upaya is the Lord himself, not even the mantras, not even the initiation, not even the mantras, not even the guru. Like the actual primary cause of liberation is the Lord himself. The upaya, the actual means, is the Lord himself. Only the initial means is the mantra. And who are self-seeking. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so we have these definition of the people who are pratikulas, people who are against serving the Supreme Lord, against surrendering to the Supreme Lord, against trying for liberation. What we also call bubukshus, right? Mumukshu, like in Mumukshapadi, that book, another book by Pillai Lokacharya, also commentated on by Manavala Mahamunigal. Mumukshapadi means that those subjects that a person interested in liberation should study. So a mumukshu is a person who wants liberation. A bubukshu is interested in bhokta. He's interested in bhoga. He's interested in material sense gratification. So there's two types of people basically. There's the mumukshus who want liberation and the people who don't want liberation, the materialists. Okay, so those persons are self-seeking. Self-seeking, right? Self-seeking here doesn't mean it means self-interest, material self-interest. There are also transcendentalists who are seeking only the self. They want Brahmananda. They want Kaivalya, or they want type of liberation, which is only isolation from the Lord, and they just want to enjoy the bliss of the self, because the self is also blissful. Satchidananda. The self can also be blissful. But that is a lesser bliss than the bliss of actually serving the Lord. Bhagavad Kainkarya in Vaikuntha. Okay, so those persons we're not talking about here. We're not talking about the Kaivalyartis, the people who want isolated bliss of spiritual bliss. Because there are also a type of transcendentalists. We're talking about here when he says self-seeking materialists. We're talking about materialists. So who are the pratikulas? Who are the people who are against the transcendentalists, the bubukshus, the materialists, right? Who are they? Number one, those who identify with the mind-body complex. If you totally identify with the mind-body complex, or to whatever extent you identify with the mind-body complex. Some people think that they're spiritual, but they still have these hang-ups. They have this. They have misogyny. They have casteism. They have all these different mentalities based on the body. They have this discrimination, bigotry against caste and creed and sex, gender and all these sort of things. Different people from different countries, different colors, different races. You know, people have these bigotries. They have these things. These are all based on the mind-body complex, and therefore, to whatever extent we have them, we are pratikulas. We are against the basic principle of being a transcendentalist, that you're not this body. Okay, so what is the bubukshu? What is the person as a materialist? He identifies to whatever extent, right? To some extent with the mind-body complex. He's whimsical, therefore, and therefore shows allegiance to others apart from the Lord, right? Other persons or things. Could be nationality. He could be a nationalist. He could be a humanist. He could be all these different isms. He could be attached to. He could be a communist, a socialist, a capitalist. You know, he's attached to these things, which all have to do with material body, mind-body complex. Okay, so allegiance to other things apart from just the Lord. He's attracted even to other means sometimes, right? So even if those means are spiritual means, karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, there's still other means, right? And he's self-seeking. So these are definitions. So the Venerable Teacher here enumerates 5 types of people who should be avoided. Pratikulas, we should avoid the pratikula, right? Number 1, those who confuse the body-mind complex with the self. Number 2, those who know that the self is different from the body, and yet still that think that they are their own masters, declining to be of mindful service to anyone else. Right? 3, those who are inclined to serve, but serve other sentient beings for their own personal gain rather than the Lord and his embodiment, which is in this world. Meaning, the Lord comes into this world in different ways, as the prapanas, as the acharya, as the deity in the temple or in the house, the Archa-vigraha form. And there are other manifestations of the Lord that we can see in this material world. Because he has unlimited qualities and unlimited expansions. I mean, the whole universe is the Lord. So everything can be seen as spiritual in that sense. So when he says embodiment of the Lord, the whole world is the embodiment of the Lord, actually. Sharira, Shariri Bhava. It is the body of even the jivas, the chaitanas and the achaitanas, the sentient and insentients are all the body of the Lord. Okay. So somebody doesn't see the proper upaya is actually the Lord, the proper means is the Lord. And fourthly, those who are engaged in the service of the Lord, so each level is a little bit more transcendental, but still is a pratikula, is against the transcendentalists ultimately, is against the proponents, it's against property, right? Those who confuse the mind-body complex as the self, those who even know that the self is different from the body, but they still think they're their own masters, those who have gotten over those first two disqualifications. They know that they should be serving, but they don't know who to serve, and they therefore serve some other sentient beings who don't have anything to do and cannot save them at the time of death and cannot not give them liberation, serving the wrong masters, right? And then those who are engaged in the service of the Lord and his creation, they are serving him, but they resort to other means, various means, in order to obtain liberation, rather than simply relying on the Lord alone. In other words, karma yogis, jnana yogis, and bhakti yogis. These people, right, they've studied the scriptures, they follow what the Lord says in the scriptures, but they don't see the essential meaning in the scriptures, that ultimately one simply has to surrender to the Lord, and that by itself and that alone is what is going to take you, right? Another difference between Wadagalai and Tengalai understandings is the Wadagalai say, okay, if you're qualified for Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, do it. Go and do that, like that. You can attain success like that. We say, the Tengalai Acharyas say, no, even that is against property. That is against property because the idea that one can himself, by his own efforts, attain liberation is a type of ahankara, is a type of false ego for the soul. It's not the actual position of the soul. It's not the actual position of the soul. The actual position of the soul is total, absolute dependence and subservience on the Lord. And that means only property is the way. Okay? So then number 5, those who render service to the Lord and the devotees, but do it out of self-interest. Right? So there may even be people who they've become prapanas like that, but somehow or other they're doing that property and they're thinking, I'm doing this property out of my own self-interest. It could be material self-interest. It could even be spiritual self-interest. People think I'm doing property because I want liberation. And I'm doing it, but I'm only doing it to get something from the Lord. No, we have to be completely surrendered unto the Lord. Whatever he wants to give us or bestow on us, that's up to him. Like that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry that the Lord will save you. Have complete faith that he will save you, but don't do property out of your own self-interest, even to attain liberation. Right? So this is very clear. These are all what considered pratikulas, right? In a certain way. Of course, number 5 is much less than number 1. Number 1 is a gross materialist who doesn't understand that you're not this body. And there are these different stages of understanding given here. So it's very interesting. So then continuing on to the next sutra, 264, with such varying ideals and agendas, each of the above categories have their own particular preferences, means, and adjectives or objectives, excuse me, right? So just as I said, if we analyze these types of people, they're all different types of people, and they have more and more, as you go through the list from 1 to 5, they have more and more understanding of the scriptures and understanding of reality, of understanding spiritual reality, or even material reality. And so there are these different categories. So we should understand that. We should understand these different people, different types of people, and we have to react to them. We have to associate with them or not associate with them. Of course, they're all supposed to be pratikulas. So it's interesting because even the person here might be a prapana, but he's acting out of self-interest. He's considered here in this sutra number 263 to be a pratikula. And what is the sutra before that says you should only should try to associate with anukulas. That's a high bar. That's a high bar to find somebody who is not pratikula according to this 5th definition, like that. But still, we have to remember that we have to associate with people. If we see that people are, by their association, are leading us astray or to some alternate reality or some alternate understanding like that, then obviously we should give up that association. But by our association and by their association, if we can together cultivate the proper understanding and the proper actions in our lives, of a prapana, of a proper refugee to the Lord, then that's good. And that's good. And that's the bottom line. Okay. So, but we should be able to categorize everybody, including ourselves, in these categories and understand how, personally, the prapana may think I'm deficient in all these ways. A humble person will say, and they'll look, oh, I'm deficient in all these ways. Do I confuse the mind body for the self? Yeah, of course I do. I'm here in this material, but as long as I'm here, I do. So there's times when I act like that. Do I do this? Do I do that? Yes, I can see all these bad qualities in myself. If I see any of the good qualities of the anukulya, I think it's simply the mercy of the Lord. And all these bad qualities, I think, yeah, these pretty much all mean me. Right? So normal person or a humble person, a proper prapana, he feels like that. At the same time, it doesn't mean that he should isolate himself from all other prapanas. So, continuing on, Sutra 265. For those who identify the jiva with the body, their preference is for others who also foster that body. Their means is money, and their objective is worldly enjoyment. For those in the second category who act through independence, their preference is for worshipping those deities that give enjoyment in heaven. In other words, the Anya Devatas, not Sriman Narayana, but other demigods or even rich and powerful people in this material world, whose enjoyment is heaven, which is temporary, not liberation. Their means is the performance of rituals, and their goals is the attainment of heaven. For those in the third category, whose allegiance is to others, they prefer to worship Brahma, Shiva, and the like, and their means is surrendering unto them, and their goal is union with them. For those in the fourth category, devoted to other means, their preference is for Lord Narayana, the Lord of all, as indweller of the gods. Their means is the practice of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, and their goal is the experience of the Lord, right? Which is fine. For those of the last category who are self-seeking, their preference is for Sriman Narayana, described in he who thinks him in whatever form. That's a quotation from Pura Vaiboli, right? Their means are various, and their ultimate objective is self-delight rather than the pleasure of the Lord, right? So that's talking about Kaivalyartis, people who are interested in impersonal liberation, the simply not service to the Lord, an active form of liberation, but a passive form of liberation, simply observing and getting the bliss of the soul. The self-seeking, swaprayojana para, the devotees who are oriented towards the Lord, but their service always has a self-seeking element to it. The quotation is from Tiruvaimoli 369, which says, "O people of this world, don't be confused regarding the primeval one, the foremost of the Trinity, the Lord of gods. He is the Father capable of affording protection, and also the Mother, and much more besides, you see. Be not confused that he is different from this one in the iconic form." In other words, the deity in the temple or the house, the deity form, the Archavigraha. "Whatever form of God you contemplate on, that form is assumed by the great Lord, the hue of the expansive ocean."